Welcome everybody to the Thursday, October 12, 2017 session in our series of public lectures and video conferences on the rise of commercial space businesses in Asia. I'm Richard Dasher. I direct the U.S. Asia Technology Management Center. We're producing this series and want to thank our visitors who've come and also remind students that if you want to take this for credit, one, you better register because the deadline for study lists is tomorrow. And two, make sure you check the requirements that we have in the syllabus. They're a little different from a lot of other one-unit seminars at Stanford, so make sure you're on board. Send me a note if you have any questions, right? r-dasher@stanford.edu. Today, we're going to talk about something that really came up a little bit last week. One of the things that Rick Giarrusso mentioned in his introduction to kind of overview of the rise of commercial space businesses is the role of big prizes, incentivization for companies to try out new business ideas or new technologies that they might not do without that kind of incentive. So probably one of the biggest ones right now related to space is this Google Lunar XPRIZE. So before Mr. Ichikawa gets here, I wanted to talk a little bit about this Lunar XPRIZE that Google is sponsoring. So the XPrize itself has become pretty famous. It goes back more than 20 years. I had no idea that Dr. Peter Diamandis created the XPrize Foundation back in 1995. He is a very prolific kind of creator of things that impact society. He founded Singularity University. He has a real interest in space. He's got the company Planetary Resources is the current name that plans to do asteroid mining. And he's also got a company called Zero Gravity Corporation that actually conducts weightless aircraft flights out of airports in the U.S. And he's got Space Adventures, a tourism business already. And he's involved in a number of different aspects, certainly interested in space. That's one of his big things. And when he created the XPrize, the idea was to create one of these competitions that would encourage radical breakthroughs that could benefit humanity. And so one of the questions I want to ask today is the connection, right? What's the connection between taking something to the moon and benefiting humanity? So each one of these XPrizes now should have an audacious goal. That's word from his website. And it should have terms that a team could win with between 2 and 7 years of work. And he intends for the XPrize to give birth to a new industry or to revitalize an existing one. So space was kind of in his sights early. One of the most prominent XPrizes that has been awarded since then was the Ansari Space Prize, which was awarded in 2004. Right now, there are a number of different XPrizes that are active. Really, the Lunar XPrize goes all the way back to 2007. And it has had several different rounds of competition. We'll go into that in a little bit. More recently, the Qualcomm Tricorder Prize, you remember Star Trek, the Tricorder Prize was awarded in April this year to 2 winners. And there's also a Global Learning XPrize, and the Barbara Bush Foundation is associated with a prize for adult literacy. There's a prize for what to do with CO2. How can you take the carbon in CO2 as you remove CO2 from the atmosphere and use it for useful things? The Shell Ocean Discovery Prize is all about mapping the ocean floor at a depth of 2,000 to 4,000 meters deep. the AI XPrize started out with an announcement by TED at the TED Talks that there was going to be an AI XPrize awarded, and then later IBM Watson took on the sponsorship and is actually putting out the money for the prizes. One of the conditions of the XPrize is that it should be agnostic to any particular technology approach. And so I wonder if the Watson AI XPrize could be done on a platform that uses something like Microsoft or Google TensorFlow. Anyway, the Water Abundance XPrize, the goal behind that is to see how much water you can get cheaply out of the atmosphere and use water extracted from the atmosphere for drinking. And then the most recent one seems to be this Anu and Naveen Jain Women's Safety XPrize, which is developing a low-cost solution to keep women safe in communities. The final cost of the device that it creates has to be less than $40, and it is really aimed at the developing world. But you see that these are quite popular, and they've attracted a lot of companies. The Google Lunar XPrize has three main conditions. First, you have to get a craft to the moon and land it there. And it can't be by accident. This is not just shooting something that happens to hit the moon. You have to tell them where you're going to land your craft in advance. The second thing is your craft has to move a distance of 500 meters. I love this phrase in the requirements, along an interesting path in a deliberate manner on the lunar surface. And then the third aspect is it's got to send back some high-resolution video, and it also has to communicate back and forth with Earth in a couple of different ways. I think the 360 panorama photograph idea that shows part of your craft is also supposed to show XPrize on it somewhere. I'm sure it's marketing. The other really interesting condition behind the XPrize is that government subsidy cannot amount to more than 10% of the total mission cost. Now, that does not count you buying like a launch service from a government provider if you pay market prices. But they have an independent accounting firm that makes sure that the teams are not spending or not getting more than 10% of their funding from government sources. So it is a big challenge. There have been a number of teams already. Right now we're down to the 5 teams that are on the right-hand side. And so I was really happy that we have 2 of the teams that we're supposed to be presenting today. But notice that already who have finished the competition are teams not only from the US and some international teams, but a team from Malaysia and a team from Chile and a team from Brazil. So it's really been quite an interesting international effort behind this. Certainly they would have probably never tried if there hadn't been this kind of incentive prize program. So the 5 teams that are left include 2 from Asia as we think of Asia, and I suppose you could argue that Israel's in Asia too. So really 3 of the 5 remaining teams are sort of associated with Asia. Because this is a huge competition, a really big challenge, they've had they've had 3 Milestone Awards that they've already given out in 2017, and I think the first ones are given out in 2016. So sure enough, Team Indus won the Landing Milestone Award, and Hakuto, which is operated by this company Eyespace, won the $500,000 Mobility Award. These Milestone Awards are given out when the company can demonstrate that it has achieved the technology capabilities that would be necessary in order to actually take the craft to the moon and do what it says it will. So they've won the Milestone Awards that they can. In order to receive the award, they're going to have to launch their craft and get it to the moon. I think the deadline is March 28, 2018. It has been put back a little bit, but the awards are definitely moving on. So I think that there's a couple of key questions that this all comes up with. One of which is, what is the relationship between this and commercial business? Whenever you see something that's real basic science, you really wonder how they can achieve their basic science goals without getting diluted into too much commercial interest. And putting something up on the moon does not obviously yield a profit margin. So what is this going to do for business? Eyespace is a very interesting company in this regard, because Eyespace is operating the team that is in the competition. So most people know the team name, Hakuto, which means white rabbit in Japanese. They don't know the company Eyespace so much. The other thing that I would like to see and like to explore through the session today is, what does this competition tell us about the emerging ecosystems for space businesses in the countries that we're targeting? So, okay, that's my introduction. So I'm real happy to introduce Mr. Taroichikawa, who is the business development manager for Eyespace. And Mr. Ichikawa used to work for one of the big Japanese trading companies. I guess you'll tell us more about that, where you were managing copper investments in Peru. And so what you'll do is kind of apply what you got from the trading company to developing business for Eyespace in the United States. You're going to be relocated, so we won't have this problem when we ask you to speak again, in the NASA Ames Research Park from this year? Next month.
Next month, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Well, glad you could come up here for a little bit early. Yeah, I don't know. I need for you to use both mics.
Okay, sure.
So, and it's set to go. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, thank you, Dr. Dasher. So my name is Yutaro Ichikawa, Global Business Development Manager of Eyespace. And yep, just as Dr. Dasher just introduced, I spent 5 years in Mitsubishi Corporation doing a copper investment business. And I spent a year in Peru because we owned a share of a Peruvian copper mine there. And then this, actually April, so it's only been 6 months, but I joined Eyespace. And probably you're wondering why I have this jungle picture below the Eyespace logo, but this is kind of the image of the career path that people, I think of, because Mitsubishi Corporation is kind of like, in Japan, it's kind of like the elite path, and once you get on the train, you go all the way to retirement without, worrying about anything. You have stable income and all that, but I just felt like I wanted to go a more challenging path, figure out my own path in the jungle, so that's why I have this image right here. And, I'm fortunate to be presenting here in Silicon Valley, actually at Stanford, because otherwise, if I were in Japan, people would be asking me, are you out of your mind? I'll be thrown a lot of questions asking me, why did you quit Mitsubishi and join a space startup? So, and actually, it was my wife that pushed me to this, encouraged me to take this challenging stage. And she actually graduated from GSB this June. So she got that mentality going, and she encouraged me a lot. So yeah, that's my background. Today I'm going to talk first about the Google Lunar XPRIZE, and then talk about Eyespace, our vision, who we are, and what we've been doing. So first, for GLXP, have you talked about the Google Lunar?
But no, I didn't see the slide.
Okay, so for For the GLXP, basically, we launch from Earth, and then with the lander, we travel to the moon, land on the moon, and then the rover, the lunar rover, has to travel more than 500 meters and send a video image back to the Earth. So these are the three requirements, just as I mentioned: land on the moon, travel 500 meters or more, and transmit HD movies to Earth. And the condition is we have to have 90% of our fund needs to be private capital. And so we are one of the 5 final teams. There were originally 34 teams. There's a Japanese team, Indian team, Israeli team, and team from the US, and an international team. And we're actually doing a ride share with Team Indus, the Indian team. And he was supposed to talk, but I guess he's not going to present today.
He's kind of radio silent.
Okay.
Maybe he forgot to get up this morning.
Okay, so we're gonna get on Team Indus's lander. We only have the rover. So what's special about Hakuto, the team that Eyespace is managing for GLXP? We're focused on miniaturization. So our rover is only 4 kilograms. It's not as big as the NASA or any of the other competitors. But it's lightweight. It uses Japanese manufacturing technology. It uses commercial off-the-shelf components, and that makes possible the agile development. And so we won the GLXP Milestone Prize for mobility of our rover in January 2015. And so now I'd like to talk more about what Eyespace is doing, who we are, and start off with our vision. Our vision is expand our planet, expand our future. Not physically expand our planet, but expand our living sphere into outer space for the creation of a sustainable world. And I think long story short is we want to make a cislunar economy. And I'll talk about how. Oh, sorry.
Water.
So this is a short movie about what we're trying to accomplish and what we're trying to do. It's about 3 minutes.
It's integral to life on Earth and plays an important role throughout the universe. When split, water molecules become fuel that can propel rockets into space. According to studies, the moon houses an estimated 6 billion tons of water. Eyespace plans to find this water and build a system of lunar fuel stations on the moon. This offers a way to reduce the amount of fuel rockets carry to drastically increase payloads. It only takes about 4 days to reach the moon. It offers a convenient option for high-frequency access, easy communications, and its gravity allows for the use of terrestrial technology. The lander will touch down on the moon's surface and dispatch small networked rovers. Using sensors, multiple rovers will traverse the lunar surface to discover water. The rovers will gather data to map potential spots for extraction, finding water, and approximating the amounts available. At the same time, they will collect information about the moon's environment to discover which areas offer the easiest access. The moon houses what are known as craters of eternal darkness, places light never reaches. 2 rovers tethered together will work to explore the crater. One will collect sunlight from above, and the other will search for water. Once the rovers have mapped the moon's surface, Eyespace will develop a rover to mine water. With rovers that drill and dig, water resources can be quarried to advance space travel. If Eyespace makes a system to safely supply energy on the moon, the world will witness a transportation system for frequent moon visits that will contribute to our global economy. Human activity on the moon's surface offers countless possibilities with exciting results. The human race to the moon and beyond. Expand our planet. Expand our future. Eyespace.
Okay, so what we're trying to do, as in the video, we're going to look for water resource on the moon and then divide the water resource into hydrogen and oxygen and use the hydrogen for fuel stations outer space. And this would reduce the transportation cost of transporting resources from the moon. The transportation cost of transporting resources from the moon would be about 1% of the price that we would have to transport from the Earth. So this was explained also in the movie, but phase one is the Google Lunar XPRIZE, where we're not only demonstrating our technology, but we're sort of trying to make a movement so that companies, non-space companies, would be involved in this, forming the space industry. And then phase two would be actually to send our multiple rovers on the moon and look for where actually the water resources exist on the moon. And then phase three would be 15, 20 years from now, but we would be extracting and processing the water resource that we find. So Eyespace is a growing team. This was 2 years ago. We only had 10 people. And then at the beginning of this year, it doubled, around 20 people. And then now we have more than 40 people. So we're a growing team. We're also international. We have people from over 10 different countries, some from Canada, US, Europe, other parts of Asia. Okay, I'll skip this. So we have, our headquarters is in Tokyo, and then we have two subsidiaries. One at the NASA Ames Research Park, which is in Mountain View, and then the other in Luxembourg. So what kind of service we have is there's mainly two services that we provide. One is the payload service, and this is kind of like the moon delivery service. And I'll talk about this more. And the second one is the sponsorship business. So moving on to my first point, the payload service. We signed an MOU with JAXA, which is the Japanese Space Agency, to send a radiation counter. This was late last year. And then we also signed an MOU with the government of Luxembourg to send a neutron spectrometer. And yeah, this was in March 2017, so yeah, pretty recent. And we're also looking to send payloads for, private enterprises. So yeah, not just space agency. As of now, we only have payloads for space agencies, but we're looking forward to deliver for private enterprises. So our second service, sponsorship business, and this is our success so far has been built upon our ability to get sponsorship and create content. And this is some of the examples of the events that we had in the past. We had educational events, live events, all kind of planetarium event with our sponsors. And these are our partners. Our official partner is KDDI-AU. It's kind of like Verizon or AT&T. It's a telecommunications company. I think there's some companies that you recognize, Japan Airlines, Suzuki, they're all sponsors. And just to provide you an image of what kind of content we've been making, this is a commercial made by Japan Airlines using our rover. So this is the kind of movement that I'm talking about. We're launching commercials, you know, having events and all. And it's very interesting how we involve non-space companies, not just space. Yeah, so this is one example. And then we also have, at our events, we have Hakuto Ambassador. We use models, comedians, cartoons, and then Second Action, which is like a famous boy band. And I'll just show you what I mean by movements. So this was our announcement of our rover. Actually, the announcement of our name of the rover, which is Sorato. And we invited Second Action, the boy band. So we collaborated with them, and they kind of had a live, and their song, the name of the song was Sorato, which is the name of our rover. Okay. Yeah. All right. So here you can see a bunch of, you know, university students, high school girls waving their phone to the moon. You can see on the front stage they have the moon. And then, so when you see, you know, high school students doing this, you know that you've made a movement. And yeah, this is the kind of events that we have to involve non-space companies and actually, you know, people. Yep. Yep. So going back to our vision, we're involving all kinds of, you know, mining companies, construction companies, and, you know, energy-related companies in the process of mining the moon and utilization of the resource on the moon. So hopefully in 2030, we'll have a lunar base, we'll have a cislunar economy, and from there, we'll further explore Mars, deep space, asteroids, and make a space ecosystem. Thank you. And I apologize for being very late. There was a significant delay in my flight, and yeah, I apologize for that.
Thanks, Ichikawa-san. I want to ask the first question, okay? And I didn't mention that your background is in law. And so I'm curious how the intellectual property works out. Does Eyespace own all the intellectual property? Do you have to share any of it with Google? Or what happens as a result of being in the XPrize?
So as of now, we're not sharing with Google. Well, Eyespace is trying to get the patent, but I don't actually know a lot about the intellectual property because this is a weird story, but in Japan, none of the studies that you do in university, doesn't necessarily relate to your career. So, you know, most of my friends from the Faculty of Law, they join, you know, finance, trading companies. Like very few of them, maybe 1% of them became lawyers. Yeah, okay. So.
No, that's legit. So basically the steps to this sort of lunar resource mining, okay? Because you're talking about, you know, 14 or 15 years in the future. That's a long, you know, time to market. So you're doing payload services, And do these events and these kind of programs that you're doing, public events, most companies would treat that as a marketing cost. Are you actually able to make some money on this? How do you make the money to keep going?
So as I explained earlier in my presentation, our main revenue is from the sponsors. And how we do it is, for example, when we have events like this, we are not paying for the cost. Okay. Instead, for example, KDD, the telecommunications company, or GEL is paying, and then they are actually paying us to use the rover at those events, okay, or to use it in their commercials. So that's how we make revenue from.
Okay, that's great. Open the floor. Go ahead. The question was, what rockets are you going to be launching on?
Okay, so for the Google Lunar XPRIZE, we'll be launching on PSLV, which is the Indian. As I explained earlier, we're going to be doing a rideshare with Team Indus, and then this PSLV is owned by the Indian Space Agency. So we're going to get on that rocket.
Just as an aside for people who are coming to the series, in a couple of weeks, on the 26th, we'll have Dr. Susmita Mohanty, who has a private Indian launch service, partly because the U.S. government will not allow American companies to use the Indian government launch service.
Your last chart, one of your last charts showed a lunar base, or a lunar base. Yeah, right there. And there was a conference last week in Hawaii, the International Lunar Base Summit. Was Eyespace there, and also what is your kind of plans for your base there?
Okay, so we were going to attend, but none of us made it there. Instead, I actually joined the League conference, which was at Baltimore. Well, it's still going on, but I decided to come here. But so for the lunar base, we're not intending to actually construct a lunar base. Rather, we're trying to build the fundamentals, because to build the lunar base, we need to cut down the cost of delivery. And so, and to do that, we need fuel, and we need the fuel station. So, yeah, we're actually focusing right now for the water resource instead of all the other things. I think the other things, construction and mining, all come after that, when we have evidence of the water resource and when we have the technology to actually, make hydrogen and provide fuel for the fuel stations.
I saw a hand back in the back. You're first.
Curious to learn a little bit more about Eyespace itself. Is it private company, venture funded? What sort of the business model?
Okay, so as of now, we are a private company, and we have a lot of angel investors, and actually we're in middle of the fundraising, Series A fundraising, and we're gonna have a little bit of VC, but most investors would come from large companies such as, I can't really say, but yeah, large companies are going to invest in our company.
Okay. Charles?
Oh, I have a couple of questions, and also your video was really superb. It's a great video. Do you have any other technology that's going to separate the hydrogen from the oxygen?
We are actually just talking about that within the management team, and we are saying that we should develop that. So my answer is no, we don't have it yet, but we need to develop that technology before. Maybe it's a good idea to develop it before we even reach the moon, so that, yeah, when we go, we can get a head start ahead of the other competitors, because as you know, there are a lot of competitors to go to the moon and do resource exploitation. So yeah, for example, Moon Express, Astrobotic, yeah, we have a lot of competitors. So that, yeah, sure.
Go ahead, yeah.
Well, I was just wondering if you could like tell us the context of where you all are in the competition and what kind of net. Because you have your 5 down from 34.
So you're going to launch by March?
So what happens next for everybody?
Good question and a hard one. So actually, Google Lunar XPRIZE extended their deadline to March 2018, and we're still trying to figure out. For us, I don't actually know the exact situation of other competitors, but for us, Eyespace and Team Indus are now talking about the launch date, and we can't really say at this point, but we're trying to figure out a time where we can meet the deadline of that 2018 March.
Do you know about any of the other 3 companies that besides Eyespace?
So they haven't, from what I know, they haven't had a launch window within the deadline, but they're competitors, so I never know.
Go ahead.
Thank you for your presentation. So my question is more about the rover. Because since it's so small, I'm wondering, does it have the same capacity compared to the other ones, like really big ones? Mm-hmm. And what kind of like special technology that you use to make it so small? Thank you.
So to answer your first question, our payload maximum payload capacity is 6 kilograms. So that's not nearly as much as the other huge rovers that are about like 900 kilograms, right? For example, the NASA rover. So our payload is very small. And what makes it possible is actually our CTO has been doing research in space robotics for over 30 years, and he's one of the leading engineers in the world in this field. And what I think the biggest thing that about a rover is the thermal, because for thermal, when you want to make it perfect, you add a lot of mass to your rover. But we have certain technology that I can't really say, but for thermal, how do I say, thermal conditions that I think that.
You mean it deals well with extremes of hot and cold? Is that what you mean by thermal conditions?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So that thermal technology, and also, what else?
Is it basically solar powered?
Yes, solar power, yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. So actually inside the rover there's not really anything in there, and that's what makes it very light.
You first.
There are companies that, like Volkswagen right now, making vehicles out of carbon fibers that are super light and super strong. Is that one of the ways that you can make your
Yes.
vehicles so light?
Yes. Good. Actually, we are using carbon fiber. All of our the rover body is all carbon fiber. So yeah, that's one reason why our rover is so light. Thank you for mentioning that.
Another question regarding policies and legislation. You say you have settlements in Luxembourg, Japan, and the US. All those countries have their own space policies. ITAR in the US and in Europe. What was your experience to manage to interact with the legislation?
So actually, I'm still based in Japan, so I haven't been to the Luxembourg office, and I haven't, I'm starting next month or December in NASA Ames. So honestly, I don't really know much about the space law yet. I need to, study about it, but yeah, as of now, I don't really know much.
Go ahead.
I'm interested in knowing more about the circumstances surrounding your collaboration with Team Indus. Were you always planning to collaborate with another one of your competitors? And if so, why did you choose this one over the other competitor?
This was actually before I joined Eyespace, but what I know, from what I know, we had a contract with Astrobotic, which was another finalist team. Was it in there?
Yeah, they're there.
Yeah, maybe not in the final 5, but they were, in the final 6 or 7, and we were going to launch with them, but then they couldn't meet the deadline of the GLXP, and we went around and we looked for a launch window that was available within the deadline, and the only, player was Team Indus. So that's how we ended up reaching a contract with Team Indus.
Okay, and I saw your hand?
Sure.
Yeah.
So you mentioned Luxembourg in the slide, and I did drop on the website, and it showed that you have some activity in Luxembourg. So why did you decide to have a second office in Luxembourg? And why do you do there different than what you did with that?
Okay, so why do we have office or subsidiary in Luxembourg? So for these, the main thing that the Luxembourg office does is they communicate with the government of Luxembourg to get that neutron spectrometer on a rover. And it takes, so there's 2 engineers and 1 manager at the Luxembourg office, and they need to figure out how much power they need for the spectrometer, what's the volume, what's the mass, all these kind of engineering details. So they're doing that, as well as, all the, so this is where I don't really know because I haven't been to the Luxembourg office, but they're figuring out, as she mentioned earlier, the legislation, the law, and yeah. To work with the government, the government doesn't move fast, so it takes a lot of paperwork and, figuring out the engineering details and those kind of stuff. That's what they're doing in Luxembourg, and that was necessary. It was necessary for us to build a subsidiary there.
But okay, go ahead.
My question is about the relationship with the academic side. So, what kind of relationship with academic organizations, for example, the university or national research institute? This is because this time the XPrize will provide a great impact to the research in planetary geology. And there are very little number of the satellite, lunar satellite, which could arrive to the moon. So this is very important to those studies. So I would like to know the relationship with your company or other computer to the
Okay, so our relationship with the academic side would be, first, we have a partnership with Tohoku University, which our CTO is a professor teaching space robotics. So we have a partnership there, and also we do a lot of, we have signed an MOU with JAXA, as I mentioned earlier. So we're talking a lot with JAXA and how getting the know-how of how they, they didn't go to the moon, but they orbited the moon for a long time. So we're trying to talk to them as much as possible. So and there's a lot more academic research groups that we've been talking to. For example, the LEAG conference, which was held in Baltimore this week. That's a lunar science academic group. So we've been talking to a lot, but I think the main two are Tohoku University and also JAXA, the Japanese space agencies.
Can you tell a little bit how Eyespace was formed? Was it formed before the XPrize, or was it formed in order to compete in the XPrize?
It was formed in the process of the Google Lunar XPRIZE. So originally, the CEO, the founder CEO, made his house an apartment room, an office, and it was all volunteers at first, and we still have volunteers. We call it pro bono, yeah, and we have 100 of them now, but it started off as just Hakamada CEO and, 5-10 volunteers.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to ask actually, just to follow up on, could you give us an idea of how many people one of these teams employs, like what are the resources they have available, like the scale of thing?
Is Eyespace pretty much the same size as other teams, do you know, or?
I think Eyespace is a lot smaller in size. I think Team Indus has about 150 people. So yeah, I think in terms of size, we have less people, we have less resources. That's why we're focused on the rover and not because the lander is, there's a lot more that we need to do for to develop the lander. And so I think, I mean, it's just...
You're 40 people now.
Yes.
Right.
And it's just this year that we've been expanding rapidly, but before it used to be really 10 people up to beginning of 2016, as you saw in the picture, so, yep.
So, the personal question, you say your spouse encouraged you to do this, right? She's not just encouraging you to leave the earth, right?
No.
What was your motivation? Why were you interested?
Okay, good question. So it's basically the same reason as why I chose to work at Mitsubishi Corporation. The ultimate reason is because I went on an exchange program for a year during university and took all these classes in global politics, and the professor or my roommate or my friends all said the Japanese presence is declining, Japanese economy is declining, shrinking, and I was kind of not angry, but I wanted to show that Japan can, with our service and technology. If you've been to Japan, Tokyo, I think you'll be impressed with the technology, but I just thought that Japan is not doing a good job in sales or marketing. The technology itself is great still. So what I wanted to do was I wanted to sell or do marketing for all these great services and product technology in Mitsubishi Corporation, but this is a special thing about Japanese companies, but you never know which department you'll be, you'll go. And it turns out that I was put in a copper investment business, and not exactly what I, thought I would be doing. And Eyespace, their rover is just a piece of Japanese technology right there. And for me to come to the U.S. and sell this, and if we can expand our, world to outer space, then, and have Japanese technology contribute to that, that was my motivation to join Eyespace.
Okay. I'm afraid we're out of time, but that was a great comment to kind of end the session on. So we've got some refreshments outside. Please stay for a while and let's talk informally. And in the meantime, Mr. Ichikawa, thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having me.